welcome to Jay Coletti's Bracket Reviews. My name is Jay Coletti and I will be your hostess. Here on this channel we are dedicated to discussing all things organized crime, and I'm very excited to talk with you about today's topic, which is the most pivotal racket in Mafia history, bootlegging. Let's get to it. Bootlegging was truly the crime of the century. For men enterprising enough, they could earn a fortune for themselves. We would not have our current organized crime structure today if not for the structures that were established with and because of bootlegging and prohibition. Bootlegging is a term that predates its time. It derives from the practice of American frontiersmen in the 1880s concealing flasks of liquor in their boots while trading. Obviously, the term became popularized during Prohibition, and this is where our focus is going to be today. To get a sense of the times, let me give you a little bit of background on Prohibition. Before 1850, per capita, the average adult, at that time adult meant 15 years or older, drank about 7 gallons of pure ethanol alcohol per year. To put it into perspective, that's about 1.7 bottles of a standard 750 milliliter bottle of bourbon per week per person. Whiskey was cheaper than tea at this time, and alcoholism was rampant, especially among young men. In reaction to this vast problem of alcoholism, the temperance movement was started. The temperance movement started in the 1830s, mostly by women and the Protestant churches to defend the women and children who completely relied on men to provide at this time. These women and children were beaten and abused and even killed as a direct result of alcoholic violence or negligence at the hands of their husbands and fathers. The temperance movement was very successful in getting the message out about the dangers of alcoholism, and by the 1850s, through the beginning of the 20th century, had effectuated a cultural shift. Between 1850 and the start of World War I in 1914, the average adult per capita was now drinking about 1.75 to 2.75 gallons of alcohol per year, with higher points obviously during the Civil War and World War I. Enter the Roaring 20s. Post-World War I, we see that number hitting that 2.75 gallon per year mark and staying there. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Anti-Saloon League, and the Prohibition Party, all of which were outgrowths of the temperance movement, saw this rising trend and pressured the government to do something about it. They didn't want to go back to what we had in, say, the 1830s. The US government gave in and ratified the 18th Amendment on January 19, 1919, to go into effect the following January in 1920. The 18th Amendment officially banned the sale, manufacturing, and transportation of intoxicating liquors for consumption in the United States. Now that you have that context, let's get back to the Mafia. The United States government in 1919 had essentially told the Mafia and any other criminal that if they were interested in the illegal sale of alcohol and distribution thereof, that they had a year to get that process going. The Mafia would have been foolish not to capitalize on the high demand for illegal booze. Coupled with moonshiners in the South and Midwest, the Mafia got to work manufacturing and distributing liquor right under the government's nose. Prior to the 1920s, the Mafia made their money with illegal gambling, prostitution, and extortion. Phrases like crime syndicate and organized crime really didn't become popularized until the Prohibition era. By the early 1920s, the Mafia had become organized. They had a lot of money to make from the illegal distribution and sale of alcohol. Cosa Nostra was up for the challenge. They made money hand over fist, enough to pay off the police and judges, purchase boats and captains, buy warehouses and truckers, and even have specialized brewmasters to make and distribute that product. Rum runners from this time were men hired to purchase and transport alcohol in from Canada and the UK. It is also during this era that we see the rise of speakeasies. Speakeasies were mob-owned, illegal bars that had the facade of a legitimate business. Some of these bars were also known as blind pigs or blind tigers. There was a difference between blind pigs and blind tigers and speakeasies though. Speakeasies referred to high-class establishments that offered food and entertainment, while blind pigs and blind tigers were strictly locations to buy beer and liquor. The term speakeasy came about from having to speak quietly or speak privately about their existence as to not alert the police to their location. Speakeasies were often disguised as soda shops, cafes, or social clubs. Behind hidden doorways and secret rooms, you could access speakeasies with a secret handshake, a secret password, or a secret knock. While this might all sound fun and thrilling for the speakeasy patron, this era, the 1920s and 30s, the Prohibition era, was marked with excessive mob violence and uncertainty. It's speculated that Al Capone alone is responsible, whether directly or indirectly, for 300 to 700 murders in this time. Speaking of Al Capone, let's talk about him and the other mobsters involved in this time. You have the 5 families of New York. These families engaged in constant battles with one another for control of the city. The violence was ramped up by the money to be made from speakeasies, with tensions ultimately coming to a head in 1931 with the Castellammarese War and the establishment of the Commission, which I covered in a previous video. Most notably from the 5 New York families, you have Charles Lucky Luciano rising to the occasion. Just 23 years old at the start of Prohibition and working for Arnold Rothstein, a racketeer in the illegal gambling business and an early investor in bootlegging, Lucky Luciano made millions working with Italian and Jewish mobsters. His most notable Jewish associates were Meyer Lansky, Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Louis Lepke Buchalter, Abe Longhees Willman, and fellow Arnold Rothstein protege Dutch Schultz. His most notable Italian associates are Frank Costello and Vito Genovese, who worked with him under Giuseppe Joe the Boss Miseria. Hailing from the Midwest city of Chicago, we also have Al Scarface Capone. Perhaps the man who profited most from the 18th Amendment, Al Capone, just 22 years old at the start of Prohibition, made $60 million per year from bootlegging and speakeasies. Al Capone was the protege of Johnny Torrio. He and Torrio co-founded the Chicago outfit after Torrio, allegedly, had his boss, Jim Colosimo, killed on May 11, 1920. In 1925, Johnny Torrio was seriously injured in an assassination attempt. He retired to Brooklyn and would later become Lucky Luciano's advisor, leaving Al Capone as boss of the Chicago outfit. Al Capone was acting boss of Chicago's violent criminal empire through the 1920s and is even said to have sanctioned the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, which I will cover in a separate video. The 18th Amendment was repealed by the 21st Amendment on December 5, 1933, but the criminal establishment that sprang forth from the 18th Amendment would have lasting effects. Lucky Luciano and Al Capone would later work together in the Commission, cementing the criminal syndicate operations into the organized structure that we see today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Racket Reviews, discussing the racket that Meyer Lansky referred to as bigger than United States steel. Bootlegging was truly the turning point for the Mafia and organized crime in general. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click that notifications button to get more Mafia content sent directly to your sub box. Ciao.